I would like to welcome you, parent sponsors, here today to this panel discussion on transition. The whole concept for today has been successful transition. What does that look like? A lot of you have told us before that, you know, with your children going away to college or going to work or to the military, you're just trying to figure out, what does this look like? What am I supposed to do? How do I support them? So we have some experts with us today. We actually are going to have another Milton Hershey employee, Cindy Kelly, will be joining us, hopefully, to talk about it from a different perspective. But we have Lehigh University staff here, and actually an alum from Milton Hershey School. So I'm just going to start here and allow them to introduce themselves to you, and we'll go from there.
Hello, I'm excited to be with you all today. My name's Stephanie Burke. I'm the Assistant Dean and Director of First Year Experience at Lehigh University. So I work a lot with the orientation program, getting students those first 4 days when they come to college, helping them transition, and then that whole first year thinking about how we can help them transition both academically and socially at Lehigh, because we know that there's lots of transitioning happening for students. And also work with families and do family orientation as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Scott. I am a director of the Office of Academic Outreach at Lehigh University. So I work very closely with colleagues at Lehigh who, once our students arrive on our campus, how do we make sure they stay on our campus, so stay at Lehigh, and that they're successful while they're there. So I help with retention. I am the advisor for one of the residence halls where a lot of students from multicultural backgrounds live. So that's very important to us, their residential experience. And so I'm here to share wonderful information with you.
Hi, my name is Paul Lyons. I graduated from here at Milton Hershey School in 2012. I started at Milton Hershey School as an 8th grader. I'm currently a senior at Lehigh University studying international relations and political science.
And he graduates in May. Let's give him a hand. It's very exciting. So thank you all for being here today. The first question that I have, and what we're going to do is I have some questions that I'm going to ask the panel, and then my lovely assistant, Jay Garvey.
I.E. Vanna.
Yeah, exactly, I.E. Vanna. He is going to take the mic around, and if you have any questions, you can ask the panel yourselves, okay? So the first question is, could you please briefly explain the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA?
Sure. So I'll give you what you need to know about FERPA. And basically, what FERPA says is that a lot of parents will often call us asking how their students doing in their classes, academically, what classes they are taking. They want to know more information. And what FERPA says is that we can't share that information because that is the student's private information. So we cannot share specifically how folks are doing in the class. And so what we typically will do is always encourage the parents to talk to their student. There are certain things, so I know I can share at Lehigh University a little bit. We do have what's called a parents portal where they can see some information about what the student's academic experience is like, but typically what happens is the student has access to can give their parents access to certain things, or say that their parent or sponsor does not have access to certain things. So there is a way to see some information, but the student has to give them the right and the access to see that. So basically FERPA is around what parents and sponsors should have access to, and that the university doesn't have the right to share that information.
So I guess what I think you should take from this, when you call to get the grades, you better have a good relationship with your child, because the school cannot tell you that information. They have to, because of this act, they have to respect the rights of a student. So you cannot get those grades. And I know that sometimes, especially when you're wanting to see how well they're doing and that type of thing, yeah, the government has said you need to have that relationship with your child and you need to have them sign off that you can get those grades, okay? So don't call them and get upset.
But I also want to stress and share that we want your students to be successful on our campus. So we work hard every day to make sure that the grades are what they should be. And as they should be A's, and your students should be doing really well. And we do have a colleague of ours who wasn't able to join us today, Lori McLean, who regularly meets with students on a weekly basis to find out how they're doing. Paul has met with Assistant Dean McLean every week throughout his time at Lehigh. So we are committed to students' academic success.
As a young adult and a grad from Milton Hershey School, Paul, what tips would you give a parent as they are looking at helping their child to transition, whether it's to work, whether it's to school, or to the world of military?
I think the most important thing that a parent can do is to let your child know that you're always going to be there for them no matter what. For me personally, I was the type of child to my parent where I kind of felt like, so I'm a first generation college student, so my mom didn't go to college. So because I went to a school like Lehigh, I kind of felt like she doesn't know what I'm going through, like in terms of academics and having to go to class. Like she doesn't know what this is like, so I can't talk to her. That's how I felt, and so I kind of pushed her away from my life academically. But the biggest thing that she did for me was to like continue to be there. My first semester in college was really rough. So when I was at Milton Hershey School, I was at the top of my class. I was student body president. I did a lot of things while I was here, but once I got to Lehigh, I ended my first semester with a 1.7. And so that was a big difference for me, and it wasn't because I was out partying or being up late, it's just because I just didn't get it. I didn't know how college worked, and I didn't feel like I had that support system from my family, and that was partly my fault because I didn't give them the opportunity to do that. But like I said, my mom, she stayed there with me, and she's like, you know, we're gonna get this, you're gonna get it. She was that motivation, and even though she didn't necessarily go to college, her just being that support system and being there for me was the biggest thing that she could have ever done. That was the second best thing she did besides sending me here to Milton Hershey School.
Thank you so much for that. Cindy Kelly has joined us, and I'm going to ask Cindy this next question. I want to ask you, can you give the parent sponsors some tips on how they could parent a young adult, as Paul is talking about his mother? Are there some tips that our parent sponsors could utilize?
Well, I think Paul actually mentioned one of the greatest tips is being aware of and sensitive to that push and pull. Oftentimes, young graduates, the very first thing that they think of after high school is, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. I'm fine. I don't need you, Mom. I don't need you, Dad. I don't need you, Grandma. I'm all on my own. Being patient, hearing that, and reminding your student, well, I'm here. When you're ready, I'm here. And asking questions. Tell me about your day. Tell me about what your challenges are. And if they say, oh, I'm fine, nothing, nod, listen, and then ask again.
Okay, thank you. For the Lehigh folks, could you speak to, in your role, any challenges that you have seen that students incur as they are coming to school and how their parents might be able to help them? Either one of you can take that.
At Lehigh University, most of the students are at the top of their grades, top of their classes in high school. And so whereas you may have, a Lehigh student may have been at the top in high school, you're not at the top when you are there amongst students who are in private schools, who are from different financial backgrounds. And I think there's some transition, and Paul could probably speak to this much better than I. Transition in realizing that you're at a very different culture than you may have been in high school. And so as a result of that, I believe that there's some academic as well as social challenges for students. And that's where there are programs in place and initiatives in place on campus, as well as people like ourselves who can help the students with the transition from high school to college.
Yeah. And some of the social transition piece, I'll just touch on that a little bit. There's a whole host of issues. I think every student that comes to college experiences something different. So some may feel that homesickness or just being away from the people that they know and love. A a lot of folks the time management piece. So one, not only having all of this free unstructured time, figuring out when to study and when to be with friends and all of that balance. But then there's also all these extra clubs and activities and things going on. And so that can lead to a whole host of issues. Usually really good things happen out of that as well. They get a lot out of those opportunities and learn a lot from them, but it can also be overwhelming when you're trying to figure out time management looks a lot different in college than it did in high school. There's a lot less structure. There's a lot more freedom and autonomy. And so I think working through that, and Paul could probably speak to that very well, working through that, that's where we hope that they're taking advantage of some of the opportunities that we offer to help them think about how to utilize their time best and what they might be spending their time on.
At this point, I'm going to stop with our questions and see if any of you have any questions. Do you guys have a question? We have one over here, Vanna.
I had breakfast a few months back with Mr. Painter, who is associated with the school. They're one of the house parents. He's a recruiter, and what he said to me, and I thought it was true and important for a lot of the parents here, who are hearing what you guys are saying and are kind of we're all a little anxious about what's going to happen. But I think that Milton Hershey kids are better prepared to move on to this step than a lot of other kids. And Paul, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. But because they're already, I think the TL makes it for a great transition. And I noticed even when we were visiting, with our son, that the other kids that were looking into this dorm life for the first time and all of these activities were just like deer in a headlight, whereas here at Milton Hershey, there's a lot of that going on already. So Paul, I'm curious to see if you felt like, compared to other students who had been in different environments, that you were better prepared for that first year. Obviously, grades, I also had a 1.8 my first semester at Drexel as an undergraduate. But anyway, I think that parents of kids from Milton Hershey that are moving on, parents and sponsors, that we've got a little bit of a break in that area at least, that the life here has prepared them for the next step, perhaps better than some other environments, other kids coming out of, high schools living at home, or even prep schools that didn't have the same kind of rigor that we have here.
So I think that I agree for the most part. I think that the transition of going away to college is pretty easy. I feel like coming from Milton Hershey School, it's much easier for you to adapt to different changes, because once you go from elementary, you go to middle school, you have a new set of house parents, you go to a different house, you're with different students. You go from middle school to high school, same thing, and then you go to TL, and it's the same transition. So we're very used to adapting to different situations, different circumstances. Everybody's home, family situation is different as well, so there's so much adaptation going on. So I think in terms of leaving Milton Hershey School to go to college, I was fine. Like, I adjusted really well. Some of my peers, they were homesick. I didn't have to deal with that because I wasn't at home for 5 years. Though I was close to home, I was only living in Harrisburg, 30 minutes away. Still, me being away just didn't seem like that hard of something to transition into. The only thing that I would say is that academically, I wasn't prepared to go on, and they've started a whole bunch of different programs here at Milton Hershey School to prepare students to get ready to go to college a lot better than the couple years ago when I was here. But that was my hardest transition, was that first semester of college academically. And it wasn't necessarily, me not utilizing my time, but it's just finding ways that helped me to learn the material in different classes. And, going to go speak to my professors, even though I was like, oh, I'm just a freshman, you're this professor who knows all this information, and I feel dumb coming to talk to you. And that's not necessarily the case. So it's just having that confidence to go and speak to those people one-on-one. So to answer your question, the transition to college isn't difficult, but it's that academic aspect, for me at least, that was difficult.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tammy. I have two students here. One's a junior, one's a senior, and one of them actually thinking about going to Lehigh. So my question is, whenever you talked about the follow-up with the freshmen, and you said you follow up with them almost on a weekly basis. I mean, how many students you have at the school? That's got to be an awful lot of work. And if there's an issue, is there some type of outreach that goes back to the parents that if, there is a miscommunication and our child is feeling overwhelmed, but they're afraid to admit to the parents that there's an issue or something's wrong, rather than, the sink or swim type thing, is there anything that comes back to the parents for an outreach?
Sure, I can start. So when the students get to Lehigh, we do have about, at Lehigh at least, we have about 1,200 students or so that come to campus. The great thing is we have lots of programs and initiatives in place as checkpoints for students to check in, to see how those issues are going, how the transition is going. So not only during orientation, they're in small groups with peer leaders, so upper class students who are constantly checking in on them. But then what we have is called the Evolution Seminar, which is a really great resource. They get into small groups of about 15 students, and they're paired up with a faculty or staff member on campus, as well as another upper class student. And in that program in particular, and most schools have something like this, I would say, they have group meetings with those folks, and then they also have individual one-on-one meetings with that faculty or staff member. And so that's an opportunity for them to check in, see how the transition is going, both academically and socially.
So other schools are doing it too, not just...
Many schools. Most schools have some sort of first-year seminar program, which is what we call ours Evolution. And so there are ways to check in throughout that semester. They're getting that contact. If the student is not doing well, there are other folks across campus that come in, like Dean McLean, who we mentioned before. She'll meet weekly with students to help them. The faculty and staff member in a first-year seminar, their job is to be the connection and the liaison to all of the resources we offer on campus. So I might not be able to help someone academically, but I know who they can go to, and I start connecting them to tons of resources on campus.
But to your question,
Come back to me with anything.
to your question, I think that's one of the challenges of parenting a young adult, is that as a parent, you're used to going to someone else to say, is what my kid's telling me really what's going on? And can you tell me how they're doing in class? Or can you tell me how they're doing? And that's one of the major changes, both for kids and parents. So what I have often talked to parents about is, if you know the resources of wherever your child happens to be, that's the opportunity to use the language of that resource at that school or that job site and just ask the question to your child. Have you ever accessed the Explorer program? Or tell me about the Explorer program. Or tell me about the last time someone reached out to you. Because those sentence starters will really help your child tell you the real story. Because as a parent, as a young adult, you're not going to have people coming to you directly and saying, Johnny's not doing so well. And that's really tough as a parent.
Yeah, what I can say, we do not come back to the parents directly. I have lots of parents call the office, and so I do speak with lots of parents if they call, and I tell them what resources are available, and we do provide lots of information, but that was an excellent point. That's what we try and encourage parents to do, is that you're a partner in that journey with your student, and so encouraging them to reach out to different resources on campus and taking advantage of those is what we share. I know lots of parents have called and said, I'm concerned about my student in this particular area. Is there anything you can do? If it's a personal problem or an academic problem. And as long as they're willing to let me reach out to the student, that's what I do. I reach out to the student, I have them come in, I sit down and talk with them, and then I get them connected to the resources that they need. And we'll usually follow up with the parent just to say, I met with your student, I encourage you to go and talk to them and ask them how that meeting went.
Distance-wise, do you have a lot of local community people that go to your college rather than people like, we don't live here, we live,
Right.
On the other side of the state, so.
We have folks from all over. We do have a good portion of people that are from the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, but we have folks from lots of countries and
We have international students.
yeah.
It's
I don't
very
know.
diverse.
With my son, I would just like to know if that student signed the release form. I don't know if you have different release form for different things, but once they sign the release form now, can you find out, well, how is my child doing? How is his grade doing? Like, you know, let's say almost close to the end of the semester or whatever. Can you then give that information? Is there a no, it's a form.
Okay, the question is, can you, if your child fills out the form?
Yes,
we're
there's a
talking about the
release
FERPA.
form.
If there's a form that goes along with that they can fill out, then you can get their grades. Is there something that a parent can do?
I don't know if a professor will tell you how the person is doing in the class. I think you're able to find out the grade after the fact, after they get the grade, but I don't know that professors will give you any sort of update on how they're doing in class.
Depending on the school, because I've been able to do that in the past. But the child would have to, the student would have to give
Right.
that release, and then, you know, I can follow up, you know, especially for the first year.
And I think what we are seeing, and I think that the panel would say that this is correct, is that as they are moving into being young adults, there are some things that they're going to have to do independently. And as we as parents want to continue to kind of nurture them and be there for them as they move forward, and that's part of what TL was about, is that we are helping them to start making decisions that they have to live by now. And that they are going to not so much rely on that parent as much as they used to. So a lot of the systems are set up where you might be able to get the grades at the end of the semester. A professor, like here at school, a teacher here will talk to you about how that child is doing, if they're not turning in homework. And I'm sure Paul can attest to this. In college, they don't care if you don't turn in your homework. You just get a 0.
We love campus portal.
Yeah, exactly. But they really don't care. They don't have the time. They're believing that once your child gets to that level, that they are independent enough to be able to take care of their grades. If they don't come to class, now Milton Hershey, because we have our graduate success program, and we may be on them, they may not get their scholarship, but the school really doesn't care. Am I correct with saying that?
I've taught an evolution seminar as a staff person, and I shared with the students who sat in front of me, I said, it is your responsibility to look at the syllabus, know the due dates of when everything is due, because the professor will not be saying, Paul, you know, are you working on your paper? It's due next week. They will not be asking you that. So you are responsible as the student to keep up with your deadlines, to make sure it's top quality work, and to also not be afraid to walk up to that professor, sit in the front of the class so he or she knows who you are, and walk up to the professor and ask them questions. Because they're the experts. So we try to empower students to really take responsibility of their lives and of their journey on our college campus.
Paul, do you have any thoughts on that?
The one thing that I will say, and it sounds like not harsh, but it's a little, straightforward and to the point. And I tell my friends at other colleges this when they complain to me about the professors. The difference between high school and college is that you have professors, not teachers. In high school, your teachers are there to teach you, they're there to help you. And I'm not saying your college professors aren't, but your professors are there to profess. They're professionals in their field, they know what they're doing, they have so much information, but they also have so many other students that they need to make sure that, that the students are learning the information, but they're not there to hold your hand. It's not like here at Milton Hershey School where your teacher's like, oh, you didn't turn in your homework? Well, come to tutoring after school, we'll help you do this, we'll help you do that. If you don't go to your professor and you're struggling, well, then at the end of the day, it's back on you because your professor has other stuff that they're thinking about. They're thinking about writing papers and submitting stuff to different colleges around the United States. So the difference between high school and college is that you have professors, not teachers.
And one of the things you might want to think about is set the stage before your child goes off. Set the stage and start to think about, what's important to me is your mom, your aunt, your grandma, your dad, to know how you're doing. I'm going to call you and ask you a couple of things. Are you okay with that? Is it, when you may want to call once a week, but your student may say, could you make that once a month? Or could you make that once every, but if you set the stage even before that goes on, then they're not going to be surprised when you call them or you text them or you say, tell me about that class.
And one other piece of advice that I always give to students that I would strongly encourage you to share with your student is introduce yourself to the professors. Even if it's there are 100 students in the class, I mean, that professor is in the end giving you a grade. And if the name is a little familiar, that's a plus. So I would strongly encourage you to share with your students to go up during the first week of class and say, hi, I'm Paul Lyons, and I just want you to know I'm going to give my 110% to learning and getting an A in this course. And I'm sure that professor, hopefully, will keep that in mind, and it will be a positive outcome.
My question is, Lehigh University was Helena's first choice for months. Unfortunately, she didn't get accepted. So now she's going to Penn State. So what are the criteria? Like, why can colleges be selective? Like, how do we know they're not discriminating or?
The reason why Lehigh University can be selective is that they received 13,000 applications for 1,200 seats. Application fees of $70 per application, and some students had the applications waived. So, like most institutions, when you have that many applications coming in, there is a level of selectivity. And so what I say is I strongly encourage students who are applying to Lehigh to contact the admissions office. The admissions officers welcome opportunities to sit one-on-one and get to know your student. You come with them, pick up coffee at Starbucks, and advocate for yourself to be one of the students who arrives on campus. You know, I'm sorry to hear that your daughter wasn't accepted, but selling yourself and sharing why a student should be accepted over any one of those other applications is really valuable.
So you look beyond the grades, transcripts?
The entire package, I don't work in the admissions office, but the entire package is looked at.
I know they spend months reading
yeah.
the application essays. They do a blind review process when it comes to that. So yes, they look at everything.
I'm going to shift just a little bit because we've been talking about going to college. And so I'm probably going to ask this question to you, Cindy. Students that are just leaving here and going to the world of work and going to the military is going to get them ready. But if they're going to the world of work, what kind of suggestions or tips would you have for a parent to help that student as they transition?
Remarkably, a lot of the same similar things is knowing that there's a breaking away process, and there's going to be I can do it all by myself to, oh my gosh, I've just been fired from my first job, I've got to come back home. I need you, I need you, I need you. So navigating that push and pull and being supportive throughout is important regardless of what environment that you go to. With the world of work, what I've heard parents really talk about is how much do I push to make sure that they establish good work habits. Our hope when students leave Milton Hershey School is they've got a pretty good work ethic, so that if they've been given a work schedule, they know that they've got to be there and be there on time. My prompt to students oftentimes is don't think that you start work at 8 o'clock, think that you start work at 7:45 or 7:30 so that you anticipate. And just reinforcing those good work ethic and work skills and being respectful to your supervisor, just like you would a teacher or someone in the community. I think those kind of reinforcements, the question is a little bit different. It's more like, instead of do this, it's had you think about, or did you think about asking your boss ahead of time that if you could have the time off because you have this medical appointment.
And for all students that are leaving high school, this is for all you guys, that you can speak to this, what type of emotions kind of come up as you're leaving high school? And Paul, I'm gonna ask you that question first. As you graduated here from Milton Hershey School, how were you feeling that day when you left?
Be honest. Be honest.
I left because I kind of feel the same way now that I did when I was leaving Milton Hershey School, being that I'm getting ready to graduate from college now. When I graduated from here, I was actually, it's a little bit different now that I think about it. I was very optimistic leaving Milton Hershey School. I was very nervous though. I wasn't sure how college was going to be. I wasn't sure how college was going to go. I wasn't sure who I was going to meet. There were 8 or 9 of us from the class of 2012 that went to Lehigh together that first year. And we all like broke off and kind of parted ways in a sense. We were there for each other still, but we didn't see each other that often. So going into college, I was very, very nervous. It was all new. It was all so new. But it was a good new. It was definitely something that was needed. I was kind of ready to just be another student because when I was here, it was a lot going on. Lots of meetings with Miss Cindy Kelly. And so there was just a lot going on. So I just really wanted to be in a new environment and have a new experience. So I was very optimistic leaving Milton Hershey School.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak to that, how a student might be feeling when they're leaving high school and going on?
I think there's a fear. I remember, and it's been a while, but I grew up in a single-parent household, no siblings. And I remember my mother extremely missing me and calling me almost every single day. She missed me, I missed her, and someone laughing, saying, that's what we're going to do. And so truly, I know that there's that fear as well as you're missing what's familiar to you. So I can imagine that students would feel that as well.
Yeah, a mix of angst and excitement, I would think, too.
What can parents and sponsors do to get their students ready for that hitting the wall, which is the first semester, academically? Just, you said you struggled. Can you tell us what you did to get out of it and advice for us to try to share with our future college students?
So to get out of it, that's the easier part of the question to answer. To get out of it, well, so I ended my first semester with the 1.7, but that wasn't the end of my journey at Lehigh. The spring semester, I ended with a 3.2. So I think hitting that wall was a big breaking point for me because I had to take a step back and figure out the things I was doing wrong. Like, what led me to get this 1.7 if my peers have over a 3.0? What am I doing wrong personally? So I think that the biggest thing that you guys as sponsors or parents can do is when they hit that wall, be there for when they fall down. Just be there to pick them up and uplift them and encourage. That's really the biggest and most important thing that you all can do because you guys can't take the test for them. And after a while, they're going to get tired of hearing you like, do your homework, do your homework. They're going to be like, Mom, I'll call you in 2 weeks and talk to you later. But I think the biggest thing you guys can do is definitely just be there to support them. That's all everybody needs is just support.
The other thing that I oftentimes think about is reminding students of what's their goal. What did they want to look forward to? And that this whatever happening right now doesn't mean you can't meet that goal. We just need to look at how to get it differently. So what can we do differently now and still have that goal in mind? And remind them of hope and remind them of their resilience and remind them that you're there to kind of support them. They just may need to do things a little bit differently.
Did you work at all whenever you went to school for the last 4 years? And is there a percentage of the kids that you find do have a job while they're at school? Because I'm talking to my daughter and she's like, Mom, I think I want to go have a job. I'm like, you have no idea what you're even thinking. I said, it's going to be so overwhelming to be at school. And, even though you have good grades here, you may not have that same, like you said, you hit the wall. And I'm thinking, she doesn't even know what she's asking for, and she's already starting to think about trying to line up a job while she's going to college. And I'm like, I just thought it was overwhelming.
So everybody has a different need for a job, I should say. A lot of my peers do not work. If they do work, it's a work-study job. And then also a lot of students that graduate from Milton Hershey School do qualify for work-study. And so I would suggest to your daughter specifically, if she qualifies for work-study, to look into work-study. Work-study is very flexible. You don't have to go off campus for it. It's right there. And a lot of those jobs you can work in the library. And you get paid to do that, but you can sit there and do homework while you're working. For me personally, I didn't qualify for work-study for whatever reason, unbeknownst to me. So I had to go off campus and get a job. And that was pretty difficult for me to manage working and making enough money, and also going to school as well, to where I had to limit it to just the weekends. So I would work 10 hours each weekend. So that was like a good balance. I think it's all about finding that balance, but I would also suggest to all your students, don't go into your first semester wanting a job, because you're gonna feel overwhelmed for the most part. First, you have to worry about that transition period, because you never know what's gonna pop up. Worry about that transition period and, you know, getting used to being in college, and then you can go and look for a job and find something to make some money as well.
I would share too. So I like that suggestion. And I'm a first-generation college student, and I needed a job. And honestly, it was the best thing that I could have done, because it helped me manage my time better. There's a whole lot of free time that they may or may not be used to. And so we actually find that oftentimes having a job or getting involved in a club, whatever it may be, actually helps them manage their time better, because there's more things in their schedule, and then they have to figure out, okay, I need to study during this 3-hour break. And so we actually find sometimes, it obviously depends on the student, but sometimes it's actually more helpful to have some of that scheduled time in there. I know I had 3 jobs when I was a college student, and it kept me on task.
And I think that I would echo that as well. It's about balance, and it's about not doing one thing too much. If your daughter goes into it thinking, I want a job where I'm going to make a lot of money, that probably would interfere with studies. But if she goes into it and kind of limits the amount of hours per week, it may give that break. And again, I'm in the same situation. I would not have made it through college if I did not work at least some hours to have another side of my life besides being a student.
So we want to thank this panel. Let's give them a hand. We really hope that some of the things and the insight that they have given you today has sparked some of that aha. As your child graduates June what? When do they graduate? 12. June 12. When they graduate, so you're a little bit better prepared for them. And know that the school has started a different program, Graduate Program Success, GPS. GPS, get to know that program, and Tanya Barton, who's running that program, because we're looking at ways to better help you as your child transitions. The next phase for you to go to right now is lunch. So some of you might see your kiddos out there at lunch. So thank you so much for coming today.